close our eyes. Gently, just let your eyes close. Take a gentle, deep breath. Deep, deep, deep doesn't mean long, doesn't mean strong, it means deep. Deep down, breathe down into the belly. Imagine you're trying to pull the breath all the way down to your waist, filling your whole body with air, but gently, without forcing. If you feel like you're pushing too long, let go. The point here is to, what we're doing with the breath, one of the main things we're doing is sending a physiological message of safety and calm to our bodies and to our nervous systems. And pushing and forcing does the opposite of that. So just gently, the deeper and the longer, the better, but only as long as it's comfortable and it feels like we're doing it gently. In through the nose, out however's comfortable. Gentle, deep, deep breaths. And as you draw that breath gently, deeply down into your body, see if you can notice and feel, direct your attention towards the feeling, the sensation of the air moving in through your nose, moving through your throat. Can you feel the air filling your chest, filling your lungs, filling up your chest all the way down as it moves down, the air filling up your body. Feel the presence of that air and the pressure of it inside the body, gentle pressure. Gently let it go. Don't push it out, just let it naturally find its way out. And notice and feel the sensation of the breath moving up, out through your chest, throat, nose or mouth. Notice the feeling of your abdomen as it fills up from the breath. It's not really filling with air, but it's filling up with other things as the chest fills up with air and presses down. And then gently let the air out and feel as your abdomen just relaxes and retracts and settles back down. See if you can notice, feel the skin of your face as it meets the air. Feel the sensation, if there is a sensation of the air against your face. Is there any tension in your face, in your cheeks, forehead, jaw, neck, back of the neck, front of the neck? And if there is, and you can just let it go, let it go. If it doesn't want to just let go, don't worry about it. Gentle, deep breath in all the way down. Turn your breath inward, your attention inward to your throat, the top of your chest. Do you feel anything inside? Tension, warmth, cold, shaking, vibrating. If there's anything you feel, just notice it. Be aware that it's there. Accept that if it's there, it's supposed to be there. For whatever reason, that belongs in that place in your body right now. Move your attention down to your chest, throughout your chest. Is there anything you feel, any sensations? Remember to keep breathing. Gentle, deep breaths in through the nose. Think of the breath as support, helping your body know that it's safe and secure as your attention is focused inwards. If there's anything inside your chest, notice it. Just be aware that it's there, and that if it's there, it belongs there, and that's exactly where it's supposed to be. Now, if there's something that comes to mind when you think of something clean, super clean and fresh, whether it's an image of a freshly cleaned room, a kitchen, a dining room, a bedroom freshly cleaned, whether it's a brand new car that smells clean and fresh, looks and feels clean and fresh, whether it's some unadulterated, untouched place outdoors in nature where you can just breathe in that natural, cool, crisp air. Whatever is the image that resonates for something clean and fresh, picture it and try to tune into how it makes you feel. Do you feel, what's the feeling that you feel inside? Sensation. Feeling a sensation in your chest, a sensation somewhere in your body that is your body's response to that noticing, observing, and feeling that freshness and cleanness and brand newness, and just really focus on the feeling that you feel in response to that freshness and cleanness, and take a gentle, deep breath in all the way down, breathing in and connecting to that sensation, to the feeling of freshness and cleanness, a brand new start. Notice how it feels. And just feel it, just feel it. Continue breathing deep, gentle, slow breaths in all the way down. And imagine the scent or the aroma of whatever that picture is. And breathe in that scent. Draw it down all the way down into your belly, all the way down into your abdomen, gently, slowly, comfortably. And just feel it. Feel that freshness and that cleanness. Feel the potential and the possibilities ahead with this environment that's new and clean and fresh. Connect to the feeling of those possibilities and just feel that possibility, and breathe in gently, deeply. And as you breathe in and feel that sense of freshness and cleanness and possibility, remember that that picture, that freshness and that cleanness is literally the picture of who we are right now after Yom Kippur. We are, you are, your body, your soul, every part of you is that clean and that fresh and has those possibilities. And so when you feel that sense of cleanness and freshness and possibility, that is actually an accurate feeling of you in the present moment. Breathe gently, deeply, slowly, all the way in, and just feel that cleanness and freshness and that potential and possibility. It would be really nice to stay here forever, but ultimately the objective of this is what it brings back to our interaction in the world, our presence in the world, and integrating. And so when you're ready, gently, slowly open your eyes. And don't underestimate how important it is to do this gently and slowly. And without moving your head, as you gently open your eyes when you're ready, just move your eyes around. Remind your body where you are, look around the room.
You should post that on YouTube.
It's on the video. Okay. Now, seeing as this is a Parsha class, the Parsha of, it's not technically the Parsha of the week. This Shabbos is going to be Sukkos, so we are going to be reading a Yom Tov portion in the Torah, but the Parsha that we are currently up to, which we will be reading on, anyone know? Everyone? Simchas Torah? The Parsha that we are currently in is Parsha of Vzos Habracha, the last Parsha of the Torah, and we will be reading it in Shul on Simchas Torah. There is a pasuk in this Parsha of Vzos Habracha that says, Torah, Tziva, Lanu, Moshe, Moirasha, Kehilas, Yaakov. Tziva, Lanu, Moshe, Moirasha, I don't know if there's a shema there actually, Kehilas, Yaakov. And what this means is the Torah, Tziva lanu Moshe, Moshe commanded us, Moirasha, an inheritance, Kehilas Yaakov, for the congregation, the nation of Yaakov. Now, it says in a number of places that when a Jewish child starts being able to talk, the first thing that we teach them is this pasuk. Torah tziva lanu Moshe, Moirasha Kehilas Yaakov. The Torah, Moshe commanded us an inheritance for the nation of Yaakov. We teach them to say Shema. I mean, that's a good question. This is the first thing. It's not necessarily a contradiction. And I would say that practically, you can say Shema you say Shema for a child from the day they're born. You can, a newborn baby doesn't necessarily have a beginning to the night, but you could say Shema every night with a baby before you put them to sleep, and eventually as they become capable of controlling their mouth and talking, they'll just be able to say it. So because of the nature of Shema and the fact that we say it every night, could say it in the morning, you don't necessarily have to teach it to them as explicitly as like, whereas this, it's more of, oh, they could talk now, let's teach them this pasuk.
It's really cute when they say it.
Yes, very cute. Children talking is amazing.
So cute.
Especially when you look at the child and you appreciate and you think about what's going on and the fact that these things are actually happening in their head and they're verbalizing things that they're thinking about, and sometimes you wonder how long have they been thinking about this and just unable to communicate it. It's amazing. Anyways, so there is so much in this verse to talk about. One of the things that's one of the fundamental primary messages of this pasuk is Tziva lanu Moshe. Moshe commanded us the Torah. Moshe brought us the Torah. And there's this, there are a lot of seeming paradoxes and catch-22s and things like that around Torah. One of them is that, we encourage in Judaism, in Jewish culture, in Torah study, we encourage the asking of questions, we encourage academic exploration, we encourage looking for new explanations, new ideas, new interpretations, new layers of meaning. But at the same time we say Tziva lanu Moshe, the whole Torah came from Moshe. Moshe gave us the Torah. And there's also a prohibition against adding anything to Torah. There's a scriptural prohibition that you are not allowed to add to Torah. Now, a big part of that obviously is practically in terms of, adding to mitzvahs we're not allowed to add. Again, there's a similar thing there that requires some understanding, which is that we are allowed to add levels of beauty, of hidra, of keeping a mitzvah in the most beautiful way beyond what's necessary, as long as we're clear that what we're doing is a higher level of, or a deeper, more comprehensive level of fulfilling the mitzvah beyond what's necessary. That's fine. When a person starts to tell someone you have to do something that you don't have to do, or to actually add to the mitzvah, that becomes a problem. Anyway, so here, on one hand, we say that Torah came from Moshe. On the other hand, we are supposed to add, but we're not allowed to add. We're supposed to present novel interpretations and meanings, understandings, explanations, but it all came from Moshe. So how does this all work together? In a sense, it is similar to what we talked about probably last week in terms of becoming a new person, right? If someone is a new person, well, they're the same someone, so they're not a new person, but they also are a new person, but they're still the same person. Yet there are multiple layers within a person, and it depends which layer you're talking about. And it's a similar sort of thing here. Here I would say perhaps at the level of, we could call them layers, we could call them maybe layers of identity. There's a story actually that the Gemara tells that Moshe Rabbeinu, after he passed away, he's in heaven and observing, and he sees Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, one of the most prominent Torah scholars in the history of the Jewish people, one of the most important figures in the development of halacha, who interestingly, at the age of 40, didn't know Aleph Beis yet, and became one of the most influential and consequential scholars, both academically and in the development of halacha. So that's something to be aware of. And Rabbi Akiva was teaching a class, and Moshe Rabbeinu was, observing from heaven, observing this class that Rabbi Akiva is teaching, and a student asks a question, and Rabbi Akiva gives this explanation and answer, and Moshe Rabbeinu, it says that Moshe Rabbeinu was, his face became dark. Moshe Rabbeinu had almost a crisis, and almost like a moment of existential crisis, because Moshe Rabbeinu dedicated everything, his life, every layer of who he was, his being. He sacrificed his legacy to bring Torah to the Jewish people, and he was the one who brought the Torah from Hashem to the Jewish people in its entirety, and nothing can be added to Torah after Moshe Rabbeinu brought it to us. And here he is observing Rabbi Akiva explaining something that Moshe Rabbeinu never thought of or never understood. I think it's not so much that he was upset that Rabbi Akiva was teaching this idea or came up with it, but he was hurt that he hadn't. And how does this work? And so Hashem basically responded to Moshe Rabbeinu and told him, relax, it's okay. And he said, Kol ma shetalmid vasik ased l'chadesh. Anything that anyone is going to come up with, and there are rules and there is a framework for valid interpretation of Torah and exegesis, etc. Anything that someone comes up with within that framework that is consistent with the Torah and the framework for interpreting and explaining and Torah values, etc. Hakol nitlan la Moshe misinai. All of it was given to Moshe on Sinai. Hashem gave all of it to Moshe on Sinai. It's a matter of extracting, unpacking, finding all the things that are inside. So Rabbi Akiva's thing that he taught, it was already there. He didn't come up with something new that Moshe Rabbeinu had not delivered to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. When Moshe Rabbeinu brought the Torah down from Mount Sinai and gave it to us, what Rabbi Akiva taught was there. It's just that it hadn't yet been extracted and unpacked and clarified until Rabbi Akiva did so. And so that, Moshe Rabbeinu calmed down a little. He was like, yes, this was also part of his legacy. And the idea here is that, the question becomes, well, how does that work? And really? It's a nice idea and it can make us feel good, but Moshe Rabbeinu didn't teach that. The idea behind this and what makes this work and make sense in a way that's real, and really this is ultimately the message of this verse of this pasuk, is that what Torah is, the actual deepest and truest identity of Torah is the infinite wisdom of the Creator. It's God's infinite wisdom. That is what Torah is. Moshe Rabbeinu brought that and presented it to us. But ultimately, the words and the information and the ideas that Moshe Rabbeinu communicated to us explicitly, directly, consciously in the words, etc., all of that was a vehicle to deliver, let's say, perhaps a layer of the infinite wisdom of Hashem. It was all there, but it wasn't all apparent. And so as we continue to learn and to study, we are working through a vehicle, the words, the ideas, as they're recorded, as they're presented, that carry a cargo, let's say, that's literally infinite, and it was there the whole time. The extent of what is communicated obviously and explicitly in the words is very limited. But the cargo is infinite, and as we continue to work and to study and to do our job of doing it the best we can and chip away at it over the generations, over the millennia, over the days and the minutes, the hours, the seconds, we can extract and unpack more and more of the cargo, which is ultimately infinite, that is inside of the words. So it was always there. Question. If that's the big message of the verse, that the contents of Torah ultimately The words of Torah are a vehicle, and the cargo that this vehicle is carrying is infinite. Really? Like, is that the first thing that you need to teach a kid who's 2 years old and is just learning how to talk? It's like, yeah, this is amazing, and it's deep and beautiful, but there's say something called age-appropriate, right? And it works in terms of behavior. There's age-appropriate behavior, and then there's age-appropriate ideas and information.
But are you giving over the entirety of that information from the beginning, or are you either giving over or they're receiving what they can handle at that level? Does that make sense?
It does. And I would say that practically, yes, you're not necessarily explaining all of this to a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
That being said, if what we're saying is that because this message about the identity of Torah is so fundamental that we want to at least take the verse that's carrying the message and give it to them, why start with that if they're not understanding it anyways? And teach them something else. What difference does it make, right? If we're saying, well, yes, we're just teaching them to say the words so that they can make their way through the words and through the layers of meaning to get there. If they're anyways not up to that, why pick this rather than anything else? If at first they're just learning to say the words, like, well, what does it matter? And to a degree, and hopefully we're going to get to this and it'll come out, we also do want to be giving that message. And that's going to be the question, right? Like, does that make sense? What does that look like? It kind of seems like they're way out of their depth. I mean, like, beyond way out of their depth. Like, it's a joke. Try to explain this to a 2-year-old. It's like, they're just going to be like, I want a drink of water. Like, you're talking about, not even, they say, I want water. How does this even make sense? So, the truth is, I don't know whether age appropriate is really, I mean, it makes sense to use the term because really what it would be the more correct equivalent would be something like, let's call it developmentally appropriate, something that's appropriate for this child's developmental stage. And, children can vary substantially, but, there are behaviors that are perfectly appropriate for a 2-year-old that are not at all appropriate for an 8-year-old, and behaviors that are perfectly appropriate for an 8-year-old that are not all appropriate for a 15-year-old, and 15-year-old and a 30-year-old, etc. And the same thing is true with understanding. There are things that if you're explaining an idea to a 25-year-old, a 30-year-old, it makes perfect sense. You try to explain the same idea the same way to a 12-year-old, and you're beyond wasting your time. And there are things that it makes sense to explain to a 12-year-old and not to a 2-year-old. So, like, really, this is the thing we're starting with, number one. So, first of all, if the thing that we are trying to communicate here is not an idea in Torah, right? When it comes to teaching information, it makes sense to teach information in a way and in a sequence that makes sense developmentally. When a kid start out in first grade, let's say learning math or whatever it is, there are several reasons you don't start out teaching trigonometry and calculus to a first grade kid. Number one is they don't have the skills of addition and subtraction and basic algebra that you need in order to do those kinds of maths. You need to teach them those skills first. Number two is highly unlikely that any of their brains are going to be developmentally, physically capable of processing that sort of information. So you teach them the information that they can understand, that they can learn, that they can get a grasp on, both in terms of where they're up to developmentally, the developmental state of their brains, and number two, the amount of information that they already know, and the skills, the academic skills that they already have developed. And that always makes sense when you're teaching information, when you're teaching ideas. The message that we're communicating here is not one of the ideas in Torah, a piece of information in Torah. What we are communicating here is the identity of the Torah. What Torah is. And because it is deep, we're not denying that it's deep. That's something that we'll address. But before that, before we get to maybe, let's say, a sense of the practicality of it, the reason why it does make sense to start with this is because before we start learning Torah, learning the information in Torah, learning the ideas in Torah, learning all the things Torah has to tell us, we're setting the foundation, the context, which is what is Torah? What is the identity of Torah? The Torah is something that Moshe gave us, and it's all in there. How is it all in there? Because Moshe delivered Torah, the words and ideas and information of Torah are a vehicle for the infinity of the Creator that is inside that vehicle, inside those words and ideas. And Morasha, this is an inheritance. It belongs to us. Right? Let's say if there's a child who, God forbid, is orphaned at a very young age and had parents who maybe, had a lot of material possessions, were wealthy, what happens? At what point, at what age does that child inherit the parents' estate? Immediately. They are the parents' child, they inherit. Now, yes, there's such a thing as establishing people who are going to manage the estate on behalf of the child, because a 2-year-old child or a 1-day-old child or a 12-year-old child cannot effectively manage the parents' estate, and it's just going to go down the drain. It's going to end up in the garbage. It's going to end up being worth nothing. So we can appoint someone to manage it on their behalf, but there is no age and there is no action necessary for them to inherit the parents' estate. The moment the parents are no longer there, the estate automatically, by definition, inherently belongs to the child. It is theirs by virtue of who they are. There's no age, there's no time, there's no actions that are required. It just is. And the Torah is that for us. Moiracha, it's our inheritance. By definition, it belongs equally to every single one of us. What about if I happen to be, not very academically capable, and maybe to the extreme, maybe I can't learn things and understand things, and like Torah, just like in reality, I have no relationship with Torah. That's irrelevant. I mean, it's relevant to the halachas of Torah study and to how much I'm going to understand, obviously, but in terms of the message of this verse, it's completely irrelevant. A child doesn't have to understand the parents' estate in order for it to be theirs. And once we understand that the identity of Torah is not the words, it's not the ideas, it's not the information, it's the infinity of the Creator that is inside them, and the ideas, the words, and the information are the vehicle that is carrying that cargo, and the cargo is the infinity of the Creator, every single one of us has equal dibs to that. That is our inheritance. It's ours. By definition, inherently, there is no action that's needed, there is no age that's needed, there's no anything that's needed. It belongs to every single one of us, period. And that's true for a child, that's true for a newborn child. It's true for a baby who was born 30 seconds ago. It's true for, regardless, by definition, if what we're saying is that it has nothing to do with age or time or behavior or achievements or anything else, it just is, period, then that's true. And so all of these parts are coming together. It's telling us it was all there because the identity of Torah is the infinity of the Creator as it was given to us through Moshe as our inheritance, and it belongs to us. This is, and because what we're talking about here is this is not one of the ideas in Torah, one of the pieces of information in Torah, this is the identity of Torah. It makes perfect sense to start with this. If we start teaching information and ideas and all of the things in the Torah without ever communicating the real identity of Torah and what it's about, we might be making things much harder on ourselves when we have to try and then teach that identity. You come to someone who's been studying Torah for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and now you're trying to get them to reframe the whole thing and to change their whole perception of Torah and of the identity of Torah. You're working against all of that time and all of that work and all of the time that their perception of understanding and picture of Torah has developed and solidified and become deeper and stronger, and now you have to go back and reframe that whole thing, it doesn't make sense to do it that way. That's number one. Number two, a person who's learning Torah without having an appreciation for the true identity of Torah, they're missing out on the beauty and appreciation of what it really is. So it absolutely makes sense to start with this. Now, practically, it's like, I'm not saying that therefore when my children became able to talk at, a couple years old, whatever it is, I'm going to sit them down and explain this to them. That being said, we can teach them to say the words, and considering that what we're the message that these words are carrying is one of identity. It's the identity of Torah. It's our identity. It's the relationship between us and the Torah at the level of identity. These are things that the extent to which you can communicate them through words is very limited. There are some things that you just can't explain. You have to experience them. You have to feel them. And this is something that we can give to children. When we have a clarity on the identity of Torah, what it is, on our identity, on our relationship with Torah at the level of our identity and Torah's identity, the fact that it belongs to us regardless, and it's our inheritance, and we're fully entitled to it, and what we're entitled to is the infinity of the Creator, and the ideas and the information is a vehicle that carries the infinity of the Creator and delivers it to us. And when that shapes the way we live, and it shapes our values, and it shapes our interactions with Torah, it shapes our interactions with the world, by the time a child talks, they've picked up on so much more than we could ever explain at the level of values, at the level of identity. Children are picking up on these things. Children, honestly, and the awareness of this is increasing in real time in data, and the children are picking up on these things in utero. Children are born, newborn babies apparently can already recognize the voices of both of their parents because they recognize the frequency and the tone that they heard in utero. Children are born already with pre-existing emotional profiles, partly genetic in the level of the soul and partly based on the levels of cortisol that they were exposed to in utero, etc. So the level of emotional regulation that parents have, because they affect each other, but primarily biologically, physiologically, the emotional regulation that a mother has while she's carrying a child that's developing inside of her has a very big impact on the physiological state in which the child is born. So, and these are things, and ultimately what does that do? What that means is the child is picking up on the parent's emotional state physiologically. Children, and certainly once they're born, long before they can speak, children are developing a sense of values, a sense of belonging, a sense of identity. And these things we absolutely can teach. And we primarily teach them by the way that we behave and by what our values are and the way that we live. And so, yes, you might not be able to explain this idea verbally to a 2-year-old. As a matter of fact, I would suggest you set your expectations before you try to realize that very unlikely you are going to be able to explain this verbally to any 2-year-old and have them grasp any of it. But you can teach them the words, and teaching the words also is a let's say in a sense, a symbol for the message that it carries that you could have been teaching them since before they were born. They could have been getting the emotional regulation and the physiological factors that come along with having these values and having this perspective already in utero. Certainly once they're born, the the electrical energy and the emotional regulation and the values. And children notice these things. They are so in touch and so in tune, and they pick up on things often that we don't even realize that we're doing ourselves. And the more that we clarify this for ourselves and align ourselves with it so that we're actually living it, the more our children are going to already have that message before they can even talk. And so the idea that we teach these words to them first thing, yes, you can't necessarily communicate the idea verbally. But the point of the message of making this the first thing you teach is to remind us, before you teach them information, transmit the identity. Transmit their identity, the identity of Torah, and the dynamic between them and Torah as a result of those two identities, which are ultimately boiled down to the same one identity. That's the first thing you want to transmit. You want that child to be going to school and learning Torah already with a recognition and awareness of what Torah is and how that fits into who they are. So when you teach them, yes, teach this first. Teach these words first. And ideally, by the time you do that, you could and should ideally have already been conveying and communicating the message to them since the day they were born, and maybe even since before that.
How do we do that?
By working on ourselves, on developing our own perspective and our own appreciation with that. And as our lives align more and more with this message, the children are going to get that.
So like the idea of saying a bracha out loud so a child can learn it, like lighting Shabbos candles, would it also be a good idea to articulate like our process through that so our child can absorb that as well?
Absolutely. If you have, I think that talking to children is so underrated. And even if they don't academically understand the words, there is so much that we communicate when we speak in body language, in nervous energy, etc. All of these things that we're communicating, and children pick up on so much, even without understanding the words. And I'm a very big believer in talking to children. A child could be 3 months old and you can talk to them. A child can be newborn, you can talk to them, explain what you're doing, talk about what's going on, and their bodies understand electrical energy. Their bodies understand emotional regulation. Their bodies understand these things from them as soon as they exist. And at what point does that shift from just understanding electrical energy and emotional regulation to actually understanding the message of the words? I think about it, when a child speaks and uses words for the first time, to whatever degree they do, they know what they're trying to say, which means they already have an understanding. So did the understanding just happen right now when they started talking? Unlikely. Did it start yesterday? Did it start a week ago? Did it start 6 months ago? And it's been gradually increasing as they also started figuring out the neural pathway from their brain down to their mouth so they could actually say it. Who knows? Who knows how long they've had some comprehension of these words before they managed to be able to actually speak them. And let's say that maybe I'm overstating it. I think that the risk of feeling or looking maybe at some layer of judgment potentially a little bit silly or foolish by talking to a child, to me that's a much lesser risk than the risk of a child losing the opportunity to learn and to develop, which could shape the course of their life. So I'm a huge proponent of talking to children and explaining what you're doing and talking about what's going on, and absolutely. And again, the also big part of it is working on our own groundedness and alignment and, all of those things so that our life starts to really reflect this and be aligned with it more and more and more. And children, absolutely, their bodies understand the way we live. They understand our behavior. They understand the state we're in, and they will learn all of that.
So what if, not saying that this is a common thought, I don't know, but like what if we're hesitant to have children, not that we don't want children, but because we don't know when we'll be at a point where like, okay, now I am emotionally grounded, I have done enough things to become mindful and everything and all the buzzwords, so I don't ruin my child, quote unquote.
That's a good question. In general, I mean, if you're asking that question, you're already leagues ahead of most, which probably means you're relatively good to go. I'm serious. You know, the fact that you have that concern means you're aware of the importance of being emotionally regulated and healthy and all of these things, which, you know, I mean, all of humanity until 10 minutes ago never even knew that that was a concept. So you're already leagues ahead. You know, and now I would say a few things. Is the other teacher waiting? No? Number one is there's some extent to which there is, in, you know, when you get into the world of, you know, of parenting and, you know, let's say emotionally healthy parenting, there's a term that I think is super important, which is good enough parenting, right? Because there's no perfect. The real world perfect is good enough. Every parent is going to lose their temper sometimes. It's a statistical impossibility that any parent is ever going to not lose their temper and never say something not right to their child, etc., right? But there's a big difference between a parent who's aware and working on things and, you know, really doing their best and loses it occasionally to a parent who's got no idea and is in a constant state of panic and urgency and fight and flight their whole life, and the child just grows up in it 24/7, one long event of stress their whole life. It's two very different things, right? Now, there's a point at which it becomes good enough, which is, yeah, you know, like there were moments of stress, there were moments of anger, there were moments when the parent said something that wasn't perfect, but like, it's good enough, right? So that's number one, is being aware of the fact that perfection is not necessary. Children are resilient, also very vulnerable. You know, I think sometimes, and they're both true, and it varies, you know, exactly what that looks like can vary tremendously from adult to adult, let alone child to child. But it doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be good enough. And if we're concerned about that, there's a much higher likelihood that it's going to be good enough. Number two is also a big thing, and this is to all big things in life. There's some extent to which we can only do what we can do, and then we have to just jump in and do what we can do and rely on Hashem, because there's no certainty. A person can be in the best place and then life throws them a curveball and it all goes out the window. You know, so on one hand, it's also remembering that we are partners with Hashem in this, and we have a responsibility to do our part. And if the numbers say that we're at a point at which it's our responsibility is to step forward into this, then step forward into it, work on that faith and acceptance. And, you know, I have like more to say, but I think those are probably the most important things. And I've got to go. So thank you. Have a good Yom Tov, everyone. Thank you very much. Yom Tov.